It was on a rainy night that everything quietly began. The streets were stripped bare of their usual brightness, left in silence as the drizzle tapped softly on the stones. Street lamps flickered pale yellow, their light stretching weakly across the park. At that hour, long past midnight, the city seemed empty, lonely, almost breathing in sorrow. Emily pulled her thin jacket tighter. Her shift had ended hours later than it should have, and with no money for a cab, she had no choice but to walk. A lukewarm paper cup of coffee in her hand was the only thing keeping the cold from sinking too deep. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was steady, gluing her hair to her forehead, darkening her shoulders. She was used to nights like this, nights that pressed on her skin like the weight of the world. But that night, one detail broke the familiar rhythm. A man sitting on a bench. His black suit clung to him, drenched, his head bent low as if the rain itself had carved him from grief. He didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. Emily almost walked past, but something about the stillness caught her. It wasn't just a man. It was loneliness made human. She hesitated, then turned back. Setting the extra coffee down beside him, she said quietly, "It's not much, but it's warmer than rainwater." He didn't reply. She lingered a moment, then nodded and walked away. She had only taken a few steps when his voice followed. Rough, low, like it had been dragged through hours of silence. "I didn't think strangers could be this kind." She didn't turn around. Her reply floated softly into the night. "People you know usually don't have to be." And then she was gone. She never saw him lift his head for the first time, his gaze following her until she disappeared. The untouched. Coffee sat beside him, still holding a little warmth, a trace of kindness in a city that rarely offered any. The next morning, the world still wore its gray coat of rain. At the cafe where Emily worked, she fought back exhaustion, wiping down counters, pretending her late walk home hadn't left her chilled to the bone. The bell over the door chimed, and in walked the man from the park. But he looked different, now. The ruined suit was gone, replaced with worn jeans and an old shirt. His eyes were tired, red-rimmed, but steady. He introduced himself simply. "Leo, I'm looking for work. Anything, cleaning, lifting, doesn't matter." The owner shook his head. "No papers, no hire." Leo didn't argue. He only bowed, his head, fingers tightening on the strap of his bag. Emily saw it. The look she once carried herself when she first arrived in the city with nothing. "He'll work harder than someone who already has everything," she said firmly. After a pause, the owner relented. "Trial, 1 week, no pay." Leo nodded gratefully. Days passed. He said little, took on the jobs no one wanted, and never complained. But once, when a customer snapped at Emily, Leo's hand twitched toward his pocket, as if reaching for a wallet he no longer carried. Instead, he caught himself, lowered his hand, and bowed in apology before quietly wiping the table. In that moment, something in him shifted, not broken, but beginning again. A week later, long after closing, Emily sat slumped at the kitchen table, exhausted. The rain had returned, whispering against the windows. Leo appeared silently, setting a steaming cup of ginger water in front of her. He sat across from her without a word. "Why wash dishes?" she asked softly after a moment. His eyes flickered with something heavy. "Because I'm not as clean as I used to be." Emily didn't respond. She understood too well. After a pause, she offered her own truth. "My mother died when I was 13. My father left. I learned early not to expect kindness." He studied her, then finally spoke what weighed on him. "I thought I was untouchable once. I had everything. And yet, what finally shattered me wasn't business or rivals. It was the woman I thought I'd spend forever with." Emily wanted to ask more. Instead, she asked one question, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Did you ever just want to disappear?" Nodded slowly. "Yeah, But then someone sat down a cup of coffee in front of me, didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just warm. They sat in a long, quiet pause, but it wasn't uncomfortable in the small kitchen filled with the scent of ginger and rain. Something passed between them, not a spark, not a fire. Something quieter, steadier, like the cup of warm water he'd poured unspoken, but enough to make someone want to stay 2 weeks after that first rainy night. The city kept moving as if no one had ever been, lost in it. But inside the worn-out cafe where Emily worked, something had shifted, not loudly, not obviously, just a quiet change that slipped into the corners of everyday moments. Emily and Leo, once strangers, had become two familiar shadows, quietly, orbiting each other. No one at the cafe knew who Leo really was. The man who wiped tables, washed glasses, and always chose the seat furthest from the light. But Emily knew she knew how he folded the dish towels just so, how he always stepped half a pace behind when walking past her, how he left a cup of mint tea waiting for her before each shift, just the way she liked it, and never once asked if she still wanted it on slow days. When customers were few and the afternoons stretched long, they'd sit behind the counter, sharing half a leftover sandwich or simply sitting in silence. Leo would read old books she left behind during breaks. Emily would listen to the low hum of the fan and the soft clink of spoons in glass cups. One dusky evening, rain came without warning. Emily had forgotten her coat as she prepared to leave. She saw hers neatly folded by the door beside a man's shirt. She looked up. Leo was already standing by the entrance, umbrella in hand, head slightly tilted. "Let's go," he said simply, as if it had always been the plan. Under the small umbrella, Emily stood close beside him, warmth radiating from the fabric of his shirt brushing her shoulder. She could hear his breathing syncing with the rhythm of the rain. For the first time, she wished the walk home would never end. What existed between them had no label. No one said like, no one said need. But in every small gesture, in every quiet moment, something soft and steady moved between them like a stream, running. Beneath stone, invisible, but undeniably real. And then on a day like any other, it began to fall apart. It was a busy Saturday afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the windows, blotting the tiled floor like unfinished ink. The cafe buzzed chatter, laughter, the grind of espresso machines and the click of high heels on stone. A group of well-dressed women entered. They didn't look like regulars. Perfume clung to them, their handbags shimmered, and their half-smiles shifted the mood of the room. Emily greeted them as she always did, politely, evenly. She didn't notice anything unusual, but from behind in the counter, Leo quietly stepped back, turning his face away. One of the women, blonde red lipstick, curled hair, stared at him. She leaned over and whispered, pulling out her phone, "Oh my God, you guys, is that who I think it is? Doesn't that look like Liam Carter?" Another woman squinted. No way he got left at the altar. What would he be doing? Serving coffee in a place like this? The blonde lifted. Her phone, one photo, one line, one post. Heartbroken air turned. Barista! This city never runs out of twisted fairy tales within 10 minutes. The post spread like wildfire. Social media erupted, comments flooded in. People confirmed it. Yes, that was Liam Carter. His face hadn't faded from the media since the canceled wedding, and now the heir to the Carter empire was wiping down tables. Emily didn't check her phone during work, but another staff member handed it to her during a lull. One look. That was all she needed. Leo, the man who scrubbed floors, washed glasses, and brewed her ginger tea when she was too tired to move. The one who walked her home in the rain. The one who once said, "I'm not as clean as I used to be." She looked up. Leo stood at the counter, hands gripping a dish towel, eyes locked on the floor, pretending he hadn't heard a thing, but she knew he had. Emily didn't react, didn't ask, didn't confront. She turned back to her customers, smiled when expected, nodded when required, like someone who hadn't heard her world just shift that night after closing when the cafe had emptied out. Emily stood in the face kitchen, quietly folding her apron. Leo walked in soundless. I should have told you sooner. He said I didn't mean to. Lie. I just needed to disappear for a while to live honestly. And you were the only part I didn't expect. She turned to face him. Her eyes were calm but cold. There was nothing in them now but exhausted silence. You said you weren't clean because of your past? She said I understood that. What I don't understand is why, when I finally started to trust, you didn't trust me back. He took a step forward. She raised her hand. I don't need an apology. I'm not angry because you're Liam Carter. I'm just sad that the person I opened up to chose to hide behind a name that wasn't real. Her voice wasn't raised, it didn't shake, but every word hit like cold stone. She placed the apron on the table softly, then turned and walked away the back. Doctor closed without a sound, but Leo knew it had just shut something far bigger inside her. He stood there for a long time. The small kitchen dimmed. His shadow spread across the wall like a spill of ink, shapeless, undefined, the dish towel still. In his hand, cold, damp, and trembling like the fingers that held it. The buzz from the photo of the heartbroken prince behind a cafe counter hadn't even begun to fade when headlines exploded with news about Marcus Veronica's new fiancé accusations of stock fraud, maxed-out credit lines, and a fraudulent investment fund under investigation. Marcus's downfall wasn't just a personal scandal. It unraveled an entire web of relationships built solely to mask greed among the names that suddenly vanished. From social events, one quietly reappeared in a very familiar place. Veronica Lancaster, Liam Carter's office, sat at the top of a gleaming skyscraper where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the city shifting beneath the golden light of dusk. No appointment, no warning. But for Veronica walked in, confident, poised, and beautiful, as if she'd never known what it was to be broken. Liam was reviewing a report when the door opened. He didn't look up. I don't take walk-ins, but I'm not a guest, Veronica replied, her voice soft as breath. I was your fiancé, remember? Liam set the report down and looked at her for a brief moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not regret, just recognition, really. I remember you leaving the altar, like someone who had no intention of ever coming back. Veronica gave a quiet laugh and sat across from him without being asked. Her gaze scanned the space, the sleek black desk, the neatly stacked folders, the antique clock ticking. Softly on the wall, everything still bore the weight of an empire, untouched by her departure. Marcus wasn't who I thought. I was deceived, she said evenly, carefully. I made a mistake. The man I should have married was you. Liam didn't flinch. He looked at her for a long beat before a quiet smile tugged at his mouth. Do you think I regret not holding on to you? Veronica tilted her head. I didn't come here to apologize. Good. Liam said, his voice cooling, because I'm no longer standing at the altar waiting for anyone. The words fell like a blade cutting clean through the thin veil of nostalgia between them as silence hovered, but Veronica didn't back down. She reached into her bag and pulled out a phone, placing it on the desk. The screen lit up an image, Liam and Emily at the cafe. His eyes on her as she laughed with a customer. The photo was so perfectly timed it could have passed for a quiet wedding portrait. She really got to you, didn't she? Veronica's voice was no longer soft. Liam didn't look at the screen. That's not something you need to know. You're right, but the med would be very interested. She leaned forward, eyes sharp as glass. If you don't come back to me, at least publicly, she'll go down with you. I have the photo, the story, and more than enough connections to turn her into the cafe girl who conned a billionaire trust. Me. This world loves a reversed fairy tale. Liam's hand tightened into a fist on the desk. A vein pulsed at his neck, not from fear, but from restraint. You always knew how to weaponize what you had, he said, voice like ice, and you always knew how to lose the ones who understood that. Veronica fired back. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the steady flow of cars below. She's not someone you can ruin with headlines. She doesn't need social media to prove who she is, but you do, Veronica, said, standing her final words, landing like a curse. So think carefully. Once I start, I don't stop. The door clicked shut behind her this time, without needing to be closed for her. Liam stood motionless, his reflection etched into the tall pane of glass, alone, upright and utterly still, just like the storm brewing inside him on one side, a past riddled with manipulation on the other, a fragile, honest beginning. But somewhere in between stood a woman who had chosen no side at all. And this time, he knew he wouldn't let anyone drag her down again. 3 days after that final conversation, in the glass office high above the city, Liam still hadn't left the conference room. He sat through meetings with shareholders, signed off on stacks of financial documents, and fielded legal requests to handle the fallout from the Marcus scandal. But in every one of those meetings, his gaze drifted toward the window where no one waited for him anymore. Emily hadn't come back after that last night at the cafe. She left no goodbye. No note. She simply vanished as if she'd never been there at all. And then on a dusky afternoon, just after the rain had stopped, Emily returned. She didn't plan to stay, only meant to pick up a few forgotten things: her order notebook, a faded wool coat, and an old book she'd left behind in the kitchen corner. The door opened with a soft chime of wind bells, but it wasn't the sound that made Emily pause. It was the person already sitting at the back corner table, Veronica, she wore. A sleek beige business suit, her hair pulled into a neat bun. Fun, no bold lipstick like usual, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. Blades wrapped in velvet in front of her sat a cold espresso coffee, as still and chilled as someone used to waiting. Without urgency, Emily stepped in the canvas tote still in her hand. She didn't rush, didn't flinch. She knew women like Veronica. If they wanted to meet, nothing about it was accidental. "You're right on time," Veronica said, like this was an appointment. "Set in stone, I didn't make one," Emily replied, voice calm but unyielding. "Veronica sipped the cold espresso anyway, I know, but I figured you'd come back, someone like you. It doesn't leave things unfinished." Emily said nothing. She walked behind the counter, gathered her belongings, tucked them neatly into her bag. Just as she was about to leave, Veronica spoke again, her tone gentler this time, but with a chill that reached bone. "I owe you a thank you. Because of you." Liam finally realized that ordinary things can have meaning. You were an experience just enough to remind him how wrong he was, to ever walk away from the world he truly belongs to. Emily froze, turned her eyes, settled on the espresso, its stains spreading slowly across the white porcelain. "You came here to say thank you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Veronica smiled, not a polite smile, but the kind that knows exactly where it's stepping. "No, I came to close this chapter." She pulled a thick envelope from her bag, set it on the table. "This is a token of appreciation, and this," she placed a stack of papers beside it, "is an NDA. Just sign it and the story of you and Liam disappears. No one ever has to know that detour happened." Emily looked at the documents, then back at her. Her eyes held no rage, just a quiet bitterness that lingered like dusk. "You think he'll come back to you if I leave?" Veronica leaned back, arms crossed. "You think someone like him could marry a cafe girl? He's the future of an empire. You are the recovery, not the destination." The air in the cafe turned heavy, like all the windows had suddenly shut. Emily stepped forward, silent. She picked up the envelope, didn't count the money, and laid it back down untouched. Then, from her bag, she pulled out a single folded sheet of paper, handwritten, each letter simple but steady, as if written by someone whose hands were trembling inside. She placed it on the table, gentle, like laying a final flower on a grave. "You're right," Emily said, her voice neither sharp nor shaking. "I don't belong in your world, but maybe just once in a lifetime, love isn't about where you come from." And then she turned away, never looked back. Veronica didn't open the letter. She sat there for a moment longer, finished the last cold sip of espresso, and when she finally rose to leave the cafe, remained empty, except for the two things left untouched on the table, the sealed envelope and the letter words from an ordinary girl who dared to hold her pride. To the end, 3 days after the encounter at the cafe, a new photo surfaced on social media, Veronica Lancaster radiant and resplendent, making a grand return at a private press event standing beside Marcus D. Reinhard, the renowned tech investor, the man she once left Liam for. In the photo, Veronica wore a fitted white dress, her gaze unapologetically proud, her hand resting lightly on Marcus's arm, as if they'd never fractured. The media dubbed them the reunited power couple, and she didn't hesitate to affirm before the cameras. We never broke up. It was just a pause to better understand each other. No one mentioned Liam, no one mentioned Emily, but within financial circles, everyone understood this was a quiet declaration. Veronica had chosen power again, and Marcus, with his vast investment empire spanning tech and real estate, was the man she needed, or rather the last man left she could still cling to that afternoon. In a glass tower in the heart of the financial district where people don't ask how are you, but what's the return? Veronica stepped into Marcus's office, her composure sharpened by hundreds of negotiations. Marcus was already seated, dressed in a navy suit, his expression unreadable behind thin-rimmed glasses. But Veronica didn't need his eyes, she needed his signature. "I finalized the PR team," she said, placing a folder on the desk. "This is the proposed partnership between Lancaster Holdings and the Reinhard ecosystem. I'm contributing shares in." Marcus raised a hand to stop her. "I know you don't need to repeat it." She hesitated slightly, then smiled, then let sign. He flipped through a few pages, gave a faint nod. "Fine, but I want you to sign this part." First, he slid a different stack across the table, a transfer of ownership agreement for 30% of the joint project. Veronica didn't blink. She believed she was back on the right playing field, the one where she always held the upper hand with Beauty Wit and the secrets she still carried about Liam. Once the papers were signed, she lifted a glass ass of red wine from a silver tray to us, the ones the media never dares to doubt. Marcus raised his glass too, but didn't clink it with hers, just a silent sip. Veronica narrowed her eyes. "What's wrong?" "Not happy." "I came back." Marcus set his glass down. "I've never been the waiting type." He pressed a remote on the table. A screen behind him lit up, playing a video captured by a hidden camera. In that very office, Veronica's voice filled the room, a call from a few days prior, speaking to another man. "If you don't come back to me, she'll be destroyed in the media." The clip ended. Marcus folded his arms, staring at her, no longer smiling. "I'm not surprised you came back, just surprised you still think you can control everything?" Veronica tightened her grip on the wine glass, but before she could respond, Marcus laid another folder on the table, a court order to freeze accounts. "You just signed over all your shares in the project, and as of now, Lancaster Holdings accounts are temporarily frozen on suspicion of money laundering." "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped, shooting to her feet. Marcus smiled, cold and faint. "You thought I was the one being bought. No, I'm the seller selling greed, and you paid far too high a price." His words landed in the silence like a pin drop in glass. Veronica stepped back. A woman pulled from the peak without a single rope left to hold on to. Her phone buzzed a message from her assistant. "Investors are pulling out, media's asking for a statement." The bravado that once carried her from gala to boardroom shattered into shards. She turned to Marcus, but his eyes no longer held the gaze of a man who had once loved or even cared to protect. Now they were the eyes of someone who knew with certainty this was the end. No one in this story had to lay a finger. Not Liam, not Emily. All it took was Veronica's own ambition, deep enough to drown. By her own hand, a month had passed since the afternoon Veronica walked out of Marcus's office. Empty-handed, the media storm eventually quieted, but not everything returned to where it once was. Emily had left the city. No one knew. No one asked. Liam only found out through a receipt from a seaside bookstore, her name listed as the new recipient with a short note in the instruction field: morning shift manager available after 9 a.m. He didn't text, didn't email, didn't show up. He simply tied up loose ends at the company, scaled back public relations, sold off a portion of his shares to return as a non-executive member. And then, on a crisp, early autumn morning, he left the road. To the seaside bookstore was winding and quiet. No blaring horns, no crowds, just the steady crash of waves and the faint scent of salt on the breeze. A small town where big stories are no longer told, and deep wounds no longer. Sue need repeating. The bookstore sat at the end of a cobbled path, small, its faded blue paint worn down by sea. A hand-carved wooden sign simply read, "Second chapter that morning." Emily opened the shop like she always did. The sun had just broken through after a night of light rain, and the chilly air felt like a bulb on tired skin. She shelved books, wiping down each cover like brushing off fragments of old memories. Everything was familiar, peaceful, until the wind chime above the door stirred. She looked up and froze. It was Liam, no suit, no luxury watch, no bodyguards or sleek cars waiting outside, just a man in a worn canvas jacket and faded jeans holding a bouquet of wildflowers, daisies. The cheap kind Emily once said, "They're the strongest flowers I." No, he stood there, not stepping inside, not smiling, just looking at her with none of the pride he used to carry. Only a quiet sincerity stripped of armor. She said nothing. He stepped forward and laid the flowers on the counter. From his pocket, he pulled out a paper coffee cup, the kind from the old cafe. He placed it beside the bouquet. "Coffee, the kind you like," he said, voice barely above the breeze, not too strong, with a twist of dried orange peel. "I remembered still." Emily said nothing. Liam took a breath. His eyes never leaving hers that day. "When I stopped believing in women, you handed me a cup of hot coffee. No questions, no expectations. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness. I just want a chance to believe in love again. Through your eyes, no music, no dramatic lights, no tearful reunion. Just one person standing before another between bookshelves and the soft scent of coffee like the first day. Like before they were ever someone." Emily reached into the drawer and pulled out an old notebook, its cover worn. Pages yellowed. She placed it on the counter, sliding it toward him, scrolled on the front in simple handwriting, "Leave your trust, reclaim what was never lost." Liam took the notebook, holding it gently. No more words were needed. They looked at each other for a long time. No smiles, no tears. Just one gaze meeting another, as if all the chaos had passed. All the wounds had become scars, and now the only question left was one left. Unspoken. Can we begin again? Not for status, but for a feeling that once felt true. No one said it aloud. But the world seemed to go still just enough for them to know. Sometimes a cup of hot coffee is all it takes to begin a new chapter. A week had passed since that early autumn morning, and while the seaside town remained quiet, the city had started to buzz again. Not because Liam Carter had returned to boardroom meetings, not because Veronica's scandal was fading like the last flicker of a dying flame, but because of an announcement from the country's most watched talk show, When Kindness Finds the Right Heart, special episode featuring guest Liam Carter, the former financial golden boy the groom left at the altar, the man who vanished without a trace and who was later spotted washing glasses in a coffee shop. The stage was simple: two chairs facing each other on a muted wood floor, with a soft LED backdrop displaying a single line, "Kindness doesn't choose where it's born, Liam." Arrived on time, no suit, no tie, none of the cold CEO persona that once defined his name, just a man in a pale gray shirt, ties and scuffed leather shoes. The look of someone who had returned from a journey without a roadmap. The host, a woman known for asking questions that made her guests cry, began with a gentle smile. "Thank you for being here, Liam. We honestly didn't think you'd say yes." Liam nodded, showing no emotion. He wasn't there for effect. He was there because there was something. He needed to say to someone whether she was watching or not. The first question came quickly. You were once at the center of media frenzy, then you disappeared, and now you've returned in a form no one expected. What everyone wants to know is why. Hide who you were from the start. Was it some kind of test? Liam sat up straight, eyes locking on the camera. No dodging, no deflection. Like in the years before, I wasn't testing anyone. He said slow and clear. I was trying it to hide from myself. The studio went quiet. I didn't need someone to prove they'd love me if I were poor. I just needed to be a man who wasn't measured by titles or account balances. The next question came softer this time. And the woman. The one who made you stay at that cafe. Who was she in that journey? Liam gave a small, unforced smile. She didn't save me, she just sat down, a cup of coffee. No questions asked. And through that I realized there are still people who believe in kindness. Not because of the name I carried, but because of how I showed up. Then came the question everyone had been waiting for. So are the two of you still together now? Liam paused. His gaze drifted not toward the camera, but through it as if looking past everything to a place only he could see. I won't answer for the present. He said, his voice lower. I just know every morning I wake up a little earlier to make a cup of coffee and hope to see that smile walk through the door. The host didn't press further. She understood some stories. Deserved to stop at the edge of a door left slightly ajar. The interview continued with a few questions about finance, about the value of disappearing at the right time. But the audience was no longer focused on numbers they were held in place by. One uncertain answer. The quiet ache of a love that needed no definition. As the show aired live, social media exploded Team Emily. She chose not to return because she knows her worth, and he needs time to become worthy of it. A beautiful story because it doesn't have a fairy tale ending. Just real people, real feelings, Team Skeptic. Let's see if he'd set that cup down for a delivery girl. This is Cinderella 4, Us 0. Except this time, the prince does the dishwashing at the end of the show as the camera began to pan out. The host asked one final question, soft as a breeze if she never comes back. What will you do? Liam smiled, a tired, steady smile from under his chair. He pulled out a paper coffee cup, the old kind with gray trim, the ones Emily used to serve. I'll still make this cup every morning. Sometimes, belief is all you have left even if the person never comes home. The camera slowly panned away, but just before the stage lights dimmed, it caught one last corner of the audience seats. There, waiting quietly, was a matching paper coffee cup. No one knew who placed it there. No one confirmed anything but the audience they knew. Or maybe they just wanted to believe that she had come, that Emily was still watching, still choosing to stay on the outside, because sometimes love doesn't need to walk beside you. It just needs to know someone still hasn't let go of hope. Thank you for staying with this story until the very last moment. If you've ever set down a cup of coffee for someone without expecting anything in return, then congratulations, you're part of the reason. This world still feels warm. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay, but some people just by quietly passing through can change you forever. If this story touched something in your heart, please like to let us know it found its way to you. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story where we keep believing that kindness can still bloom from the simplest, quietest places.